She saw him in a wheelchair sitting alone at the wedding. Her son moved closer and called him Daddy. She froze. Arlo? Arlo, where did you go? Arlo Sinclair scanned the crowded wedding reception, a flutter of panic rising in her chest as she searched for her 5-year-old son. The sea of elegant dresses and tailored suits made it difficult to spot one small boy in a miniature tuxedo. Then she saw him, his copper curls unmistakable even from behind, approaching a man seated alone in a wheelchair near the edge of the garden terrace. Relief washed over her as she began making her way through the crowd. "Excuse me, sorry," she murmured, navigating between guests. The man's back was to her, his shoulders broad beneath a well-cut suit. Something about his posture, the way he held his head, triggered a distant memory she couldn't quite place. "Arlo, honey, don't bother The words died in her throat as her son reached the wheelchair. "Daddy," Arlo exclaimed, his voice carrying across the terrace with innocent certainty. "You're the man from Mommy's videos. The one who saves forests." The man in the wheelchair turned, and time seemed to stop. Familiar green eyes widened in shock, the same eyes that had once looked at her with love, then anger, then nothing at all before he'd walked out of her life nearly 6 years ago. Thorne Everett, her ex-husband, the father who had never known he had a son. Their eyes locked across the terrace as conversations around them quieted. Arlo stood frozen, her carefully constructed life crumbling around her in the space of a heartbeat. Thorne's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something else entirely, a realization that struck with the force of an avalanche. "Arlo," his voice, deeper than she remembered, broke the silence between them. Is this my son? Have you ever had a single moment turn your carefully constructed world upside down? That instant when years of secrets and carefully crafted stories collapse in the space of a heartbeat? Today's story explores exactly that impossible situation, when a chance encounter at a wedding forces two people to confront the painful truth they've been avoiding for 5 years. If you've ever wondered how a single word can change everything, stay with me for this emotional tale of secrets, regret, and the unexpected paths to healing. 6 hours earlier, Arlo had stood in front of the mirror in their hotel room, adjusting the delicate silver necklace at her throat. The mountain resort was beautiful, all rustic luxury with breathtaking views of the surrounding peaks, but she couldn't shake the feeling that attending this wedding was a mistake. "Mommy, look, I'm super handsome." Arlo burst from the bathroom, his bow tie crooked and his dress shoes on the wrong feet, but beaming with pride in his first suit. Arlo's heart melted at the sight. "You absolutely are," she said, kneeling to fix his tie and swap his shoes. "The most handsome man at the whole wedding, I'd say." "Even handsomer than the groom?" Arlo asked, his hazel eyes, so like his father's, wide with hope. "Especially handsomer than the groom," she assured him, brushing a copper curl from his forehead. "Now, do you remember what we talked about? About behaving at the ceremony?" Arlo nodded solemnly. "Sit quiet. No talking. Stay with you, or any Zara." He counted the rules on his small fingers. "And if I get bored, I can look at my special book, but only if I'm super quiet." "Perfect." Arlo pressed a kiss to his forehead, careful not to muss his painstakingly combed hair. "You're going to do great." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Zara, Arlo's best friend since college and Arlo's honorary aunt. She swept in with her usual energy, resplendent in an emerald green dress that complemented her dark skin and close-cropped hair. "Well, look at you two." She spun Arlo around admiringly. "Absolutely stunning. Arlo, you're going to break some hearts on the playground after this." Arlo giggled. "I don't want to break hearts. That sounds mean." "Figure of speech, buddy." Zara winked at him before turning her appraising gaze to Arlo. "And you, my friend, are a vision in that dress. The blue brings out your eyes." "Thanks," Arlo said, smoothing the silk material self-consciously. "Though I still don't understand why Ren insisted on such a formal affair. It's her second marriage, for heaven's sake." "Because your cousin has always been extra," Zara replied with a laugh. "Remember her 25th birthday? The one with the imported ice sculptures and live flamingos." "How could I forget? One of them ate my purse." Arlo smiled at the memory, but it faded quickly. I don't know why I let her guilt me into coming. We barely speak except at holidays." Zara's expression softened. "Because you've been hiding away for too long, H. It's time to start living again." She glanced meaningfully at Arlo, who was now examining his reflection in the full-length mirror, practicing what appeared to be formal bows. I haven't been hiding, Arlo protested weakly. I've been raising my son and building my career. From your home studio, taking only remote commissions, avoiding family gatherings, declining dating setups. Zara counted off. It's been 5 years since you moved back, and your life revolves entirely around Arlo and your illustration work. That's not fair. There was that speed dating event you dragged me to last year, where you spent the entire time showing potential suitors pictures of rare plant species and discussing your deadline for the botanical encyclopedia, not exactly opening your heart to possibilities. Arlo sighed, knowing her friend was right, but unwilling to admit it. Arlo and my work are enough. Not everyone needs romance to be fulfilled. True, Zara conceded. But everyone needs connection, community. Family beyond just the two of you. She nodded toward Arlo, who was now attempting to tie his own shoelaces. And speaking of family, have you thought more about what you're going to tell him as he gets older? About his father? Arlo's spine stiffened. He knows his father is doing important environmental work around the world. That's enough for now. Arlo, please, Zara. Not today. Arlo's voice dropped to ensure Arlo wouldn't hear. Today we're just going to celebrate Ren's wedding, eat some cake, and maybe even dance a little. No heavy discussions about the past. Zara held her gaze for a long moment before nodding. Fine. One normal, drama-free wedding coming up. She clapped her hands. Arlo, ready to party, little man? Ready. He jumped up, nearly losing a shoe in the process. Will there be cake? Mountains of it, Zara promised. But first, a very boring ceremony where we have to sit very still. Arlo's face fell momentarily before brightening again. But then cake. Then cake, Arlo confirmed, taking his hand. Let's go. The ceremony was being held in the resort's famous alpine garden, with rows of white chairs arranged before a flower-covered arbor. Mountains provided a majestic backdrop, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over everything. Under different circumstances, Arlo might have appreciated the breathtaking setting, perhaps even sketched it for future reference in her botanical illustrations. Instead, she found herself scanning the gathering guests with nervous vigilance. She hadn't actually expected to see Thorn here. Why would he be? He and Ren had never been close, and as far as Arlo knew, he was still working overseas. The last she'd heard, through deliberately limited channels, he was involved in sustainable agriculture projects in Southeast Asia. She'd checked the wedding invitation and guest list carefully. His name wasn't mentioned anywhere. Still, she couldn't shake the unease that had plagued her since agreeing to attend. Perhaps it was simply being at a wedding, with all the inevitable reminders of her own failed marriage. Or perhaps it was bringing Arlo to an event where someone might ask questions about his father, questions she wasn't prepared to answer truthfully. Arlo, you came. Her cousin Ren, already dressed in her wedding gown, appeared before them in a cloud of tulle and perfume. And this must be Arlo. My goodness, he's grown so much since I last saw him. That tends to happen with children, Arlo replied dryly. It's been 3 years, Ren. Has it really? Ren looked genuinely surprised. Well, time flies when you're falling in and out of love. She winked at Arlo. You look very handsome in your suit, young man. Thank you, Arlo replied politely, just as Arlo had coached him. You look like a princess. Oh, he's delightful. Ren turned back to Arlo. You've done an amazing job with him, all on your own. I've always admired that about you, how strong you've been since. Well, you know. Arlo forced a smile. Thank you for inviting us. The setting is beautiful, isn't it? When Julian proposed, I knew immediately I wanted a mountain wedding. Something about the majesty of nature, the permanence of these ancient peaks. It feels like a good omen for a marriage that will actually last this time. Ren laughed lightly. Oh, I should get back before my maid of honor has a conniption. See you at the reception. With a flutter of her hand, Ren was gone, leaving a trail of expensive perfume in her wake. She seems nice, Arlo commented, looking after her retreating form. She's something, Arlo muttered, then caught herself. Yes, cousin Ren is very nice. And today is her special day, so we're going to help make it perfect by being on our absolute best behavior, right? Right. Arlo nodded enthusiastically. Can we sit now? My feet hurt in these shoes. Arlo led him to seats near the back, where they could make a quick exit if Arlo became restless. Zara joined them moments later, her expression unusually serious. "Everything okay?" Harlow asked. "Fine," Zara replied too quickly. "Just ran into someone unexpected. Nothing to worry about." Before Harlow could press further, music began and the wedding party started their procession. For the next 45 minutes, she focused on keeping Arlo entertained and quiet through the ceremony, which featured not only traditional vows, but also poetry readings, a string quartet, and a unity candle ceremony complicated by the mountain breeze. By the time the officiant finally pronounced the couple husband and wife, Harlow was mentally exhausted from the effort of keeping a 5-year-old still for so long. "You did amazing," she whispered to Arlo as they stood for the recessional. "I'm so proud of you. Can we have cake now?" He whispered back, clearly at the end of his patience. "Soon," she promised. "First a cocktail hour, then dinner, then cake." Arlo's face fell. "That's forever." "I'll find you some snacks to tide you over," Zara promised, ruffling his hair. "And maybe we can sneak away to explore those cool fish ponds I saw on the way in." As the crowd began moving toward the terrace for the cocktail reception, Harlow felt herself relaxing slightly. They'd made it through the ceremony without incident. Just a few hours of reception, and then they could retreat to their hotel room. Tomorrow they'd drive back to their quiet life, this whole wedding weekend becoming just another event to tick off the calendar. If she'd known how completely her life was about to change, she might have grabbed Arlo and fled right then. The mountain air grew cooler as evening approached, but strategically placed heaters kept the terrace comfortable. Waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while a jazz quartet played softly in the background. Harlow kept Arlo close, accepting congratulations for the bride from distant relatives who clearly didn't remember her name, but recognized her as Ren's artistic cousin with the little boy. "The one who got divorced from that environmental engineer, right?" She overheard one elderly great-aunt stage whispering to another. "Such a shame. He was so handsome. What was his name again?" "Something unusual." Harlow steered Arlo in the opposite direction, toward the refreshment table. "Let's find you some of those little quiches you like," she said brightly, ignoring the burning in her cheeks. "Mommy, look. They have those puff things with cheese." Arlo pointed excitedly at a tray of gougers. "Good eye," she said, helping him select a few. "Not too many, though. We still have dinner coming." "Is it dinner time yet?" he asked around a mouthful of pastry. "Almost. They're starting to direct people to their tables now." Harlow glanced around, looking for their table assignment. "Let's find our seats, shall we?" As they navigated through the crowd, Harlow caught snippets of conversation, the usual wedding small talk about the bride's dress, the mountain setting, the quality of the champagne. Nothing to trigger the growing sense of unease that was building in her chest. Until she heard a name. His name. Can't believe Thorne actually made it. First time he's been back in the States since the accident, from what Julian said. Harlow froze, her hand tightening involuntarily around Arlo's. "Ow, Mommy, too tight," he protested, trying to wiggle free. "Sorry, baby," she murmured automatically, her attention fixed on the conversation happening just a few feet away between two men she didn't recognize. In a wheelchair now. Permanent, apparently. Damn shame for someone who used to be so active. Julian says he's still working, though, consulting on environmental projects from home. Tough adjustment, but he's making the best of it. Wheelchair? Accident. Harlow's mind raced, trying to process this information. Thorne was here, at this wedding, and he'd been in some kind of accident that had left him in a wheelchair? "Mommy, I'm bored." Arlo tugged at her hand. "Can I go play with those kids?" Harlow followed his gaze to where several children around his age were chasing each other between the tables. Her first instinct was to say no, to keep him close, safe from the possibility of encountering the father who didn't know he existed. But the rational part of her brain reminded her that Thorne had never seen Arlo. He wouldn't recognize his own son, even if they crossed paths. "Stay where I can see you," she instructed, kneeling to his level. "And when I call, you come right away, understand?" "Yes, Mommy." He was already backing away, eager to join the other children. "I mean it, Arlo. Right away. I promise." And then he was gone, darting between guests toward the other children. Harlow watched him go, then turned to scan the reception more thoroughly. If Thorne was really here, she needed to locate him, to ensure they could maintain a safe distance. The thought of facing him after all these years made her stomach clench with anxiety. What would she say? What would he say? And what about Arlo? For 5 years, She'd convinced herself she'd done the right thing by not telling Thorn about their son. He'd made his choice when he'd chosen his dangerous career over their marriage. When he'd left for that assignment in a conflict zone despite her pleading, despite her ultimatum. When he hadn't responded to her initial attempts to reach him after discovering her pregnancy. She'd told herself he didn't deserve to know, that he'd forfeited that right when he'd walked away. That Arlo was better off without a father who would prioritize his work over his family, who would take unnecessary risks, who might break his son's heart the way he'd broken hers. But now, learning he'd been injured, seriously enough to require a wheelchair, she felt the first stirrings of doubt. Had she been wrong to keep Arlo from him? Had her pride and hurt blinded her to other possibilities? Harlow, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Zara appeared at her elbow, concern evident in her expression. He's here, Harlow whispered, her voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the reception. Thorn is here. Zara's expression confirmed what Harlow had already guessed, her friend had known. I was going to tell you, she said quickly. I just saw him during the ceremony and was trying to find the right moment. How? Why? Thorn barely knew Ren. Harlow's mind was still struggling to make sense of his presence. He's friends with Julian, apparently. They met through some environmental initiative a few years ago. Zara took Harlow's elbow, guiding her toward a quieter corner of the terrace. Harlow, there's something else you should know. He was in an accident about 4 years ago. A landslide at a reforestation project. He's in a wheelchair now. I overheard someone mention it, Harlow said numbly. Is it permanent? Zara nodded grimly. From what I gathered. Lower body paralysis. Harlow closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this information. Thorn, who had always been so physical, so alive, climbing mountains, kayaking rapids, hiking through remote forests. The man who couldn't sit still for a movie without fidgeting. Now confined to a wheelchair. I need to get Arlo, she said suddenly, opening her eyes. We need to leave. Harlow, wait. Zara caught her arm. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe it's time to tell the truth. Are you insane? Harlow hissed. Tell him now? Here? At a wedding? In front of hundreds of people? After 5 years of silence. Not like that, Zara said calmly. But you could approach him privately. Explain. Start a conversation. There's nothing to explain. He left. He chose his work over our marriage. He never responded when I tried to reach him initially. Did you really try, though? Zara's question was gentle but pointed. You sent what? 2 emails to his work address. Left 1 message with his company. He made it clear he didn't want to hear from me, Harlow said defensively. And by the time I knew about Arlo, the divorce was already final. I'm not judging you, Zara assured her. I'm just saying, there are 2 sides to every story. And now, learning about his accident, don't you wonder if there might be more to his silence than you assumed? Before Harlow could respond, a commotion from the center of the reception caught their attention. The bride and groom had arrived, to enthusiastic applause and cheers. The distraction gave Harlow a moment to collect herself. I need to think, she said finally. And I need to keep Arlo away from him until I figure out what to do. Where is he? Thorn, I mean. Zara scanned the crowd. I saw him earlier near the west end of the terrace, by the mountain view. He was keeping to himself. Harlow nodded, already formulating a plan. They'd stay on the opposite side of the reception. After dinner, they'd make their excuses and leave early. Tomorrow they'd check out before breakfast and be on the road before most of the wedding guests were even awake. They could avoid this confrontation entirely. I need to find Arlo, she said. He was playing with some children, but I don't see them now. Together, they circulated through the reception, looking for Arlo's distinctive copper curls among the other children. They checked under tables, behind decorative arrangements, even in the restrooms. With each passing minute, Harlow's anxiety grew. He wouldn't wander off, she said, trying to keep the panic from her voice. He promised to stay where I could see him. Kids get distracted, Zara said reassuringly, especially with other children around. I'm sure he's fine. That was when Harlow spotted him, across the terrace. Her heart nearly stopped. Arlo was approaching a man in a wheelchair positioned near the edge of the terrace, overlooking the mountains. The man's back was to them. But even from a distance, Harlow recognized the set of those shoulders, the particular way he held his head. 5 years had passed, but some things were imprinted too deeply to forget. Oh my God, she breathed. Zara, that's. I see him, Zara confirmed grimly. Go. Quickly before. But it was too late. Even as Harlow began moving through the crowd, she saw Arlo reach the wheelchair. She was too far away to hear what her son said initially, but she could see him gesturing animatedly, the way he did when excited about something. The man in the wheelchair turned slightly, and though she couldn't see his face fully, she could tell he was responding to Arlo. Harlow pushed more urgently through the crowd. "Excuse me. Sorry, I need to." She had almost reached them when she heard Arlo's voice, clear and delighted, carrying across the now quieting terrace. "Daddy, you're the man from Mommy's videos. The one who saves forests." The world seemed to stop. Conversations around them faltered as heads turned toward the source of the childish exclamation. Harlow froze, mere feet away, as Thorne's wheelchair turned completely. And there he was, Thorne Everett. Different than she remembered, his face leaner, new lines around his eyes, his dark hair now threaded with silver at the temples, but unmistakably him. The shock in his green eyes as they met hers mirrored her own panic. "Harlow," his voice, deeper than she remembered, broke the silence between them. Is this my son?" Sometimes the walls we build to protect those we love become the very barriers that keep us from healing. If Harlow's story resonates with you, hit like and subscribe to hear more tales of families finding their way back to each other through the most unexpected circumstances. The silence that followed Thorne's question seemed to stretch into eternity. Around them, wedding guests pretended not to stare while obviously hanging on every word. Harlow felt rooted to the spot, unable to move or speak, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. It was Zara who broke the spell, stepping forward to place a gentle hand on Arlo's shoulder. "Hey buddy, how about we go check out that chocolate fountain I saw inside? I bet they even have marshmallows for dipping." Arlo, oblivious to the tension, looked torn between the exciting prospect of chocolate and his discovery. "But I just found my daddy," he protested. "The one from the videos about saving trees." Thorne's gaze, which had been fixed on Harlow, shifted to Arlo, really taking in the boy for the first time. Harlow could see the moment of recognition in his eyes as he noted Arlo's copper curls, so like hers, and the distinctive shape of his eyes and chin, unmistakably Thorne's own. "It's okay, Arlo," Thorne said, his voice gentle despite the storm Harlow could see brewing behind his eyes. "The chocolate fountain sounds amazing. Maybe after you try it, we can talk more." "Promise?" Arlo asked, serious now. "I promise," Thorne replied, matching his solemnity. This seemed to satisfy Arlo, who allowed Zara to lead him away, though he glanced back several times, his small face a mixture of confusion and hope. As they disappeared into the crowd, Harlow found her voice at last. "Not here," she managed, gesturing vaguely at the curious onlookers. "Somewhere private." Thorne nodded, his expression unreadable as he wheeled himself back from the edge of the terrace. "There's a small lounge just inside, to the left of the main reception area. I noticed it earlier. Should be quiet." Without waiting for her response, he began maneuvering his wheelchair through the crowd, which parted almost magically before him. Harlow followed, acutely aware of the whispers and stares trailing in their wake. By tomorrow, the story would be all over the family grapevine. Harlow's secret child, the father who didn't know, the dramatic wedding revelation. Wren would probably be furious at having her big day overshadowed, though the drama-loving part of her might actually enjoy it. The lounge Thorne had mentioned was blessedly empty, a small sitting area with comfortable couches and a gas fireplace providing gentle warmth against the evening mountain chill. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered the same spectacular view as the terrace, but with privacy from prying eyes and ears. Thorne positioned his wheelchair near one of the couches and gestured for Harlow to sit. She perched on the edge, her back straight, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "How old is he?" Thorne asked without preamble, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of tension. "5, Harlow replied. "He'll be 6 in January." Thorne did the mental calculation swiftly. "So you were pregnant when I left for the Myanmar project? When we separated?" "I didn't know then," Harlow said, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "I found out 2 weeks after you left. After you made it clear our marriage was over. And you didn't think to tell me?" The control was slipping now, anger beginning to color his tone. "You've kept my son from me for nearly 6 years, Harlow." "I tried to reach you initially," she countered, her own anger rising to meet his. "I called your office. I emailed. I even contacted that coordinator. What was her name? Serena? She said you were unreachable in the field and would get back to me. You never did. Because I was buried under half a mountain. Thorne's voice rose sharply before he visibly reined himself in. The landslide happened 3 weeks after I arrived in Myanmar. I spent the next 2 months in a rural hospital with a broken back, uncertain if I'd live, let alone walk again. By the time I was stable enough to be transported back to the States, our divorce was already final. The information hit Harlow like a physical blow. I didn't know, she whispered. I thought. I assumed you got my messages and chose not to respond. And later, Thorne pressed. Once you knew I was alive? Once you'd had our child? What was your excuse then? Harlow looked away, unable to meet the accusation in his eyes. By then, it had been months. The divorce was final. You never reached out either. I thought. She trailed off, the justification she'd repeated to herself for years suddenly sounding hollow. I thought you didn't want any connection to your old life. To me. So you decided, unilaterally, that I wouldn't want to know my own child? The hurt in his voice was raw, undisguised. What gave you that right, Harlow? You left me. The words burst from her with more force than she'd intended. You chose that assignment over our marriage. You knew how dangerous it was, how afraid I was of losing you to one of your calculated risks, and you went anyway. You made your choice. I chose my career, yes, Thorne acknowledged, his voice quieter now. I chose an assignment I believed was important. That doesn't mean I chose not to be a father. That decision was made for me, by you. The truth of his words struck home, and Harlow felt the first hot tears threatening. She blinked them back fiercely. Would it have changed anything? If you had known about the pregnancy before you left? Thorne was silent for a long moment, considering her question. I don't know, he admitted finally. I'd like to think it would have. That I would have found a way to balance both, my work and our family. But I can't rewrite the past, Harlow. None of us can. No, she agreed softly. We can't. A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words and missed opportunities. Outside the windows, the mountains were silhouetted against the darkening sky, eternal witnesses to human folly. He called me Daddy, Thorne said eventually, wonder mixing with pain in his voice. He recognized me. How? Harlow sighed, the fight draining out of her. I show him videos. Your TED Talks about environmental conservation. Documentaries you've been featured in. News segments about reforestation projects. She caught his surprised expression and continued. I wanted him to know something about you. I couldn't bring myself to erase you completely from his life, even if you weren't physically present. What have you told him about me? About why I'm not in his life? That you're doing important work saving forests and waterways around the world. That you help communities build sustainable relationships with their environment. Harlow met his gaze steadily. I never told him you abandoned him, if that's what you're asking. I never painted you as the villain. Just the absent hero, Thorne said, a hint of bitterness returning. Convenient. I did the best I could. Harlow stood abruptly, pacing toward the windows. I was alone, pregnant, building a career while preparing for a child. I made decisions based on what I thought was best for Arlo, for his emotional well-being. And not telling him his father was paralyzed in an accident, that was for his emotional well-being too. Thorne's question hit its mark. Harlow turned back to face him. I didn't know, she said again, the words inadequate even to her own ears. I purposely avoided news about you. It was easier that way. Easier for whom? Before she could answer, the door to the lounge opened, and Zara appeared with Arlo in tow. The boy's face was smeared with chocolate despite what appeared to be Zara's best efforts with a napkin. Sorry to interrupt, Zara said, looking between them uncertainly. But someone has been asking very persistently to return to his daddy. It's okay, Thorne said, his expression softening as he looked at Arlo. We were just finishing our adult conversation. Arlo approached Thorne's wheelchair with the direct curiosity of childhood. Why are you in that chair with wheels? Are you hurt? Arlo. Harlow began, mortified, but Thorne waved off her concern. It's a fair question, he said, then addressed Arlo directly. Yes, I was hurt a long time ago. My legs don't work the way they used to, so I use this wheelchair to get around. Arlo considered this seriously. Does it hurt? Sometimes, Thorne admitted, but not as much as it used to. My friend Delia broke her leg jumping off the swings. She had a cast and crutches, but then she got better. Arlo's brow furrowed. Will you get better too? Harlow felt her heart constrict at the innocent question, but Thorn answered with remarkable composure. No, buddy. My injury is permanent. But that's okay. I've learned to do things differently, and there's still plenty I can do. Like save forests? Arlo asked, his face brightening. Mommy shows me your videos all the time. You're my hero. Thorn glanced at Harlow, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face. Your mom showed you those, huh? That was kind of her. She says you're very brave and smart. Arlo continued, unaware of the undercurrents between the adults, and that you help people all over the world learn to take care of trees and animals and rivers. I try, Thorn said softly, visibly moved by his son's admiration. But if you're my daddy, how come you never came to see me? The question, delivered with a child's blunt innocence, hung in the air between them. Harlow stepped forward, ready to intervene, to shield both Arlo and Thorn from the painful truth, but Thorn held up a hand, stopping her. That's a very good question, he said, his gaze meeting Harlow's briefly before returning to Arlo. And the honest answer is, I didn't know about you until today. If I had known I had such an amazing son, I would have moved mountains to be in your life. Arlo frowned, processing this. But Mommy knew. Why didn't she tell you? Now Harlow did step in, kneeling beside her son. That's complicated, sweetie. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. We think we're doing the right thing, but later we realize we could have made better choices. So, it was a mistake not to tell Daddy about me? Arlo persisted, looking between them. Harlow hesitated, caught between honesty and self-protection. Yes, she admitted finally. I should have tried harder to let your daddy know about you. That was my mistake, and I'm sorry. Thorn's expression registered surprise at her admission, but he quickly refocused on Arlo. What's important now is that we do know each other. And if it's okay with you and your mom, I'd very much like to start being part of your life. Arlo's face lit up. Really? Could we go see the forest you saved? And the animals? Could I help? Absolutely, Thorn said, smiling despite the tears Harlow could see gathering in his eyes. There's so much I want to show you, to teach you. If that's what you want. It is. Arlo turned to Harlow, his expression pleading. Can he, Mommy? Can Daddy come visit us? Or we visit him? Please. Harlow looked at her son's hopeful face, then at Thorn's guarded one. The magnitude of what had happened, what she had done, was only beginning to sink in. For 5 years, she had kept father and son apart, justified by hurt and fear and pride. And now, in the space of an hour, that separation had been bridged by a child's innocent recognition. Yes, she said softly. We have a lot to figure out. But yes, your daddy will be part of your life now. Arlo let out a whoop of joy and immediately launched into a detailed explanation of his kindergarten class's recent project on rainforests, complete with animated hand gestures and sound effects. Thorn listened with rapt attention, asking questions that delighted Arlo with their specificity and interest. Watching them, Harlow felt a complex mixture of emotions. Grief for the years lost, fear of the changes to come, relief at no longer carrying the weight of her secret, and beneath it all, a tentative hope that perhaps something good could emerge from this unexpected reunion. Zara caught her eye from across the room, giving her a supportive smile and a subtle thumbs up. There would be challenges ahead, difficult conversations, arrangements to be made. But for now, seeing the joy on her son's face as he connected with the father he had admired from afar, Harlow allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her biggest mistake might lead to healing none of them had thought possible. As evening deepened outside the windows, father and son continued their animated conversation, making up for lost time with the resilience that comes so naturally to children and the determined appreciation of moments that comes only after great loss. And in that small mountain lounge, surrounded by a wedding celebration none of them were participating in anymore, the first fragile threads of a new kind of family began to weave themselves together. When your carefully guarded secrets are revealed in the most public, unexpected way, the aftermath can be devastating. But sometimes, as Harlow is discovering, truth has a way of creating new possibilities we never imagined. If you've been touched by this story of secrets and unexpected reunion, like and subscribe to hear what happens next as this newly discovered father and son begin to build a relationship after 5 years of separation. And then we made this huge poster with all the layers of the rainforest. Arlo continued enthusiastically, hardly pausing for breath. I did the emergent layer at the very top, because that's where the tallest trees are, and the most sun and the cool birds like macaws and eagles. Thorn nodded, completely engrossed in his son's explanation. That's exactly right. The emergent layer gets the most sunlight, which is why those trees grow so tall. They're competing for light. That's what Ms. Parker said too. Arlo beamed, delighted to have his knowledge confirmed by his newfound hero. She said I knew more about rainforests than anyone else in class. Mommy helps me learn. She draws pictures of plants for books. I know, Thorn said, glancing briefly at Harlow. Your mom was always an incredible artist. I'm not surprised she's made a career of it. Before Arlo could continue, a discreet knock at the door interrupted them. A server in the resort's uniform entered, looking slightly uncomfortable at intruding on what was clearly a private moment. Excuse me, he said politely. The bride has been asking about Miss Sinclair's whereabouts. The first dance is about to begin, and apparently she's needed for family photos. Harlow had completely forgotten about the wedding reception continuing outside their small bubble of personal drama. She glanced at her watch, surprised to see that nearly an hour had passed. Thank you, she told the server. Please let my cousin know I'll be there shortly. After he departed, she turned to Thorn and Arlo with a sigh. I should make an appearance. Ren will be livid if I disappear completely from her wedding, especially for family photos which she's probably orchestrated down to the exact positioning of each person. Can I stay with Daddy? Arlo asked immediately, the new word, Daddy, rolling off his tongue with remarkable ease considering he'd never used it before today. Harlow hesitated, looking to Thorn. It wasn't that she didn't trust him with Arlo. Their instant connection was obvious, but the situation was so new, so fragile. I'm happy to watch him, Thorn said, reading her expression. But I understand if you're not comfortable with that yet. Please, Mommy. Arlo's pleading eyes were difficult to resist. Daddy was just going to tell me about the monkeys that live in the canopy layer. Spider monkeys, Thorn supplied with a small smile. Amazing creatures. They have prehensile tails, which means they can grab things with their tails like another hand. Arlo finished excitedly. I know that already. Of course you do, Thorn said, pride evident in his voice despite having known his son for less than an hour. Watching them together, their shared enthusiasm and the similar way they gestured when explaining something, Harlow felt a pang of something like regret mixed with joy. They belonged together, these two. She had been wrong to keep them apart, regardless of her justifications. All right, she decided. You can stay with your father while I take care of these photos. But stay in this lounge, okay? Don't wander off. We won't, Thorn promised, his expression serious. Thank you, Harlow. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak further, and headed for the door. Zara followed her out, leaving father and son engrossed in discussion about canopy creatures. Are you okay? Zara asked as soon as they were in the hallway. That was intense in there. I honestly don't know, Harlow admitted, running a hand through her hair, uncaring that she was disrupting the careful styling she'd done earlier. Everything's happening so fast. This morning, I was a single mother with a secret. Now Thorn knows about Arlo. Arlo knows about Thorn, and they're already bonding like they've known each other forever. Kids are resilient, Zara observed, and Arlo has been craving a father figure. All those videos you showed him, the stories you told, you kept Thorn alive in his imagination. Now the real man has appeared, and he's living up to the hero image. For now, Harlow said, unable to keep the worry from her voice. But what happens when the novelty wears off? When they have to navigate a real relationship with all its complications? When Arlo has questions about why we separated, why I kept them apart? Then you'll deal with those challenges together, as parents, Zara said firmly. Look, I'm not saying this is going to be easy. There's a lot of hurt and history to work through. But what I saw in that room just now, that was the beginning of something real and important. Don't let fear of what might go wrong prevent you from embracing what's going right. Harlow took a deep breath, steadying herself. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, Zara replied with a grin. You just don't listen to me often enough. Now, let's go face your cousin's wrath and get these photos over with so you can get back to your boys. My boys, Harlow repeated softly, testing the phrase. It felt strange and yet somehow right. The family photos were as tedious as Harlow had expected, with Ren micromanaging every detail from positioning to expressions. More smile, Harlow. No, not that much. You look manic. Just a gentle, elegant smile. Yes, like that, but more genuine. Throughout the ordeal, Harlow's mind kept drifting back to the lounge where Thorn and Arlo were getting to know each other. What were they talking about now? Was Arlo asking questions she wouldn't want answered? Was Thorn forming judgments about her parenting, her choices? Earth to Harlow. Ren's voice cut through her thoughts. We're done with the formal group shots. You can go back to whatever family drama you were staging earlier. Though I must say, choosing my wedding for your big reveal was a bit much, don't you think? I didn't plan it, Ren, Harlow said tiredly. I had no idea Thorn would be here. Really? Ren looked skeptical. You didn't see his name on the guest list I sent? He wasn't on the guest list, Harlow insisted. I checked specifically. Oh, Ren's perfect brow furrowed. He must have been Julian's last-minute addition. Julian mentioned inviting an old friend who'd been having a rough time since an accident. I didn't make the connection that it was your Thorn. He's not my Thorn, Harlow corrected automatically. We've been divorced for 5 years. And yet you never told any of us you had his child, Ren pointed out. That's quite a secret to keep from family, Harlow. I had my reasons, Harlow said, unwilling to get into the complicated justifications with her cousin on her wedding day. I'm sure you did, Ren replied, in a tone that suggested she found those reasons lacking. Well, now it's all out in the open. Quite dramatically, I might add. The family will be talking about this for years. I'm sorry if it overshadowed your wedding, Harlow said, though she didn't feel particularly apologetic. Ren had always thrived on drama, preferably her own, but she wasn't above enjoying the scandalous developments of others. Don't be silly, Ren waved a hand dismissively. It adds spice to the event. Now, I should get back to my new husband. The cake cutting is in 20 minutes. As Ren swept away, Harlow turned to Zara with a grimace. That went better than expected. She's too happy about her own situation to properly savor your discomfort, Zara observed. Lucky for you. Are you going back to check on Arlo and Thorn now? Yes, and then I think we should probably leave. It's getting late, and this has been a lot for one day. Zara nodded understanding. Want me to come with you? Or would you prefer some privacy for this next part? Harlow considered the question. Come with me to the lounge, but then maybe you could give us a few minutes alone? There are things Thorn and I need to discuss without an audience, even a friendly one. Of course, I'll wait in the hallway and escort you all back to the room when you're ready. When they returned to the lounge, they found Thorn and Arlo huddled over Thorn's phone, watching what appeared to be a nature documentary. Arlo was perched on the arm of a chair pulled close to Thorn's wheelchair, his small body leaning comfortably against his father's shoulder as if they'd been sitting that way for years instead of minutes. The sight made Harlow's throat tighten unexpectedly. This was what she had denied them both for so long. The simple physical comfort of father and son, the easy affection that seemed to have developed instantaneously between them. Oh, cool, Arlo exclaimed, pointing at the screen. That monkey is using a stick to get termites. Tool use, Thorn explained. Many primates have figured out how to use simple tools to access food that would otherwise be difficult to reach. It's a sign of intelligence and problem-solving ability. Like how I use a fork to reach the pickles at the bottom of the jar? Arlo asked seriously. Thorn laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Exactly like that. You're a natural scientist, observing parallels in behavior. They were so engrossed in their discussion that they didn't notice Harlow and Zara's return until Zara deliberately cleared her throat. Hey, you too, she said brightly. Learning about monkeys, I see. Arlo looked up, his face alight with excitement. Mommy, Daddy showed me videos of real monkeys in the rainforest. And he said maybe someday we could go see them for real. Harlow raised an eyebrow at Thorn, who had the grace to look slightly abashed. I might have gotten carried away with enthusiasm, he admitted. I mentioned that I consult on a project in Costa Rica that has excellent facilities, including accessibility features for visitors with mobility issues. No promises were made about specific trips. But we could go, right, Mommy? Arlo pressed, his eyes pleading. Daddy says there are sloths too, and they move super slow and only come down from the trees once a week to poop. That's fascinating, Harlow said, unable to suppress a small smile at her son's enthusiasm for this particular fact. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's a lot we need to figure out first. Like what? Arlo asked, his brow furrowing with confusion. Like where your daddy lives now? and how often you'll be able to see each other, and all sorts of grown-up logistics, Harlow explained gently. Oh, Arlo's face fell slightly before brightening again. But we will figure it out, right? Because I really want to know my daddy. And sea monkeys. We will absolutely figure it out, Thorne assured him, his expression serious as he met Harlow's eyes over Arlo's head. All of us, together. Zara stepped forward, sensing the need for the adults to talk privately. Arlo, I just remembered there's a really cool fish pond in the garden that lights up at night. Want to go see it with me while your mom and dad talk about boring grown-up stuff? Are there big fish? Arlo asked, immediately interested. Huge, Zara confirmed. Some of them are orange and white, like that movie with the lost fish. Nemo. Arlo was already sliding off the chair arm. Can I go, Mommy? Please. Yes, but stay with Auntie Zara, Harlow instructed. And no touching the water, understood? I promise, Arlo said solemnly before turning to Thorne. Will you still be here when I come back? I'll be right here, Thorne promised. Take your time looking at those fish. Once Zara and Arlo had left, the lounge fell into a heavy silence. Harlow sat on the couch across from Thorne, trying to gather her thoughts. There was so much to say, so many years to account for, that she hardly knew where to begin. He's incredible, Thorne said finally, breaking the silence. Smart, curious, compassionate. You've done an amazing job with him, Harlow. Thank you, she said, genuinely touched by the compliment. He makes it easy, most of the time. He has your brains and your passion for nature. And unfortunately, your stubborn streak. Thorne smiled faintly. Poor kid, getting the worst traits from both of us. And the best, Harlow amended. He has your sense of wonder, your ability to see connections between things. And apparently your charm, given how quickly he's wrapped you around his finger. It didn't take much, Thorne admitted. One look, and I was a goner. His expression grew serious again. We need to talk about what happens next, Harlow. About how we move forward from here. Harlow nodded, steeling herself. Where do you live now? You mentioned Costa Rica, but is that permanent? No, I consult on projects there, but I'm based in Seattle. After the accident and rehabilitation, I needed a home base with good medical facilities and accessibility. My company's headquarters are there too, which makes it convenient. Seattle, Harlow repeated. That's a significant distance from Portland, where she and Arlo had built their life, where her illustration studio was established, where Arlo attended a school he loved. About a 3-hour drive, Thorne confirmed. Not ideal, but manageable for regular visits. Weekend parenting, holiday arrangements. You've thought about this already, Harlow observed. I've had about an hour to process the fact that I have a 5-year-old son, Thorne said, a hint of the earlier anger returning. So yes, I've been thinking intensely about how to be part of his life despite the geographic challenge. Unless you're planning to continue keeping us apart. No, Harlow said firmly. I've made my share of mistakes in how I handled this situation, but I won't compound them by denying either of you a relationship now. Arlo deserves to know his father, and you deserve to know your son. The tension in Thorne's shoulders eased slightly. Thank you for that, at least. But, Harlow continued, holding his gaze steadily, we need to move carefully. Arlo has formed an instant attachment to you, largely based on the idealized image he's constructed from videos and stories. Real relationships are more complicated. There will be disappointments, disagreements, challenges. I need to know you're committed to working through those, that you won't disappear from his life if things get difficult. Like I disappeared before? Thorne's voice was sharp. That's not what happened, Harlow, and you know it. I didn't abandon our marriage. We reached an impasse. I took an assignment you disapproved of, yes. But I fully intended to return, to try to work things out. It was the accident that prevented that, not a lack of commitment. And after the accident, during recovery, Harlow pressed. You never reached out then either. Thorne was quiet for a moment, his expression pained. No, I didn't. By then, the divorce was final. I was in a dark place, learning to navigate life with paralysis, mourning the loss of the active lifestyle that had defined me. I thought you were better off without me, without the burden of a disabled ex-husband complicating your life. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest in a way they had rarely been during their marriage. A burden. Harlow repeated, her voice softer now. Is that how you saw yourself? Thorne's hands tensed on the armrests of his wheelchair. How else would I see it? I went from being the adventurous environmental crusader you married to a man who needed help with basic daily functions. I couldn't even get into our old apartment building with its 3 steps and no ramp. He gave a bitter laugh. Not exactly the husband anyone dreams of. You think that would have mattered to me? Harlow asked, leaning forward. That I would have turned away from you because of a physical disability? Wouldn't you have? Thorne challenged. We were already separated, Harlow. You had already decided you couldn't live with my risk-taking. And then the very risk you feared most came to pass. Would you really have welcomed me back with open arms, wheelchair and all? The question struck at something deep inside her, a truth she hadn't allowed herself to examine. Would she have? Or would she have seen his injury as vindication of her fears, further proof that she had been right to demand he change? I don't know, she admitted finally. I'd like to think I would have been there for you, especially knowing I was carrying your child. But I can't honestly say how I would have reacted then. I was young, scared, hurt by what I saw as your rejection of our marriage in favor of your work. And I was equally hurt by what I saw as your attempt to change who I fundamentally was, Thorne countered. We were both stubborn, both convinced we were right. And both wrong, Harlow added softly. At least partly. Thorne nodded, a hint of the old connection flickering between them, the ability to eventually reach understanding, even in conflict. So where does that leave us now? Besides sharing a son we're just getting to know? Co-parents, Harlow said decisively. Whatever our past, whatever mistakes we've both made, we need to focus on what's best for Arlo going forward. He needs both of us in his life, working together despite our history. Agreed, Thorne said. But that requires trust, Harlow. Trust that's been severely damaged. How do I know you won't decide tomorrow that having me in Arlo's life is too complicated and start restricting access? The question stung, but Harlow recognized its validity. You don't, she acknowledged. Just as I don't know for certain that you'll remain committed to being an active parent when the novelty wears off. We're both going to have to prove ourselves through actions, not just words. Fair enough. Thorne ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Harlow's chest ache with unexpected nostalgia. So practically speaking, what happens next? I'm here until Monday. I'd like to spend as much time as possible with Arlo before I have to return to Seattle. He has school on Monday, Harlow said automatically, then caught herself. But we could extend our stay through the weekend. Give you two some time together before we have to go back to Portland. Relief and gratitude flickered across Thorne's face. Thank you. That would mean a lot to me. And after that, Harlow pressed, what are you envisioning? Initially, weekend visits. I could drive down to Portland, or you could bring Arlo up to Seattle. We'd alternate, share the burden of travel. He paused, considering. Video calls during the week. I'd like to be involved in his education, his activities. Know what's happening in his daily life, not just see him every other weekend. Harlow nodded. It was reasonable, what any involved parent would want. And holidays? Birthdays? We'll work it out, Thorne said firmly. Like adults. Like parents who put their child's needs above their own comfort or convenience. All right. Harlow agreed, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the relief of sharing it. We'll start there and adjust as needed. But Thorne, she added, her voice growing serious. There's something else we need to discuss. Something important. What is it? Legal rights, Harlow said, forcing herself to meet his gaze directly. You're not listed on Arlo's birth certificate. Legally, you have no parental rights at the moment. I'm prepared to change that, to formalize your status as his father, if that's what you want. The offer clearly caught Thorne by surprise. You do that? Voluntarily. It's the right thing to do, Harlow said simply. He's your son. You should have legal recognition of that fact, with all the rights and responsibilities it entails. Including child support, Thorne noted, which I'll happily provide, backdated if you'll allow it. You shouldn't have had to bear the financial burden alone all these years. Now it was Harlow's turn to be surprised. That's generous, but not necessary. We've managed fine. It's not about necessity, Thorne insisted. It's about responsibility. About doing what's right, even if it's 5 years late. Before Harlow could respond, the door opened and Arlo burst in, his face flushed with excitement. Mommy, Daddy, the fish were so cool. Some of them were bigger than my arm. He held out his arm for comparison, and they came right up to the edge when Auntie Zara sprinkled some food. That sounds amazing, Thorne said, his entire demeanor transforming as he focused on his son. Did you see any that weren't orange and white? Sometimes there are black and gold ones called koi. Yes, there were black ones with orange spots and white ones with red spots, and even one that was all gold and shiny. Arlo's description continued in enthusiastic detail as he moved to stand beside Thorn's wheelchair, automatically placing his small hand on the armrest as if he'd been doing it his whole life. Watching them, Arlo felt a curious mixture of joy and sorrow, joy at their natural connection, sorrow for the years they had missed. Zara caught her eye from the doorway, her expression questioning. Arlo gave a small nod and smile, indicating that things were proceeding as well as could be expected. It's getting late, Arlo said, checking her watch. Past someone's bedtime, actually. But I'm not tired. Arlo protested, even as he stifled a yawn. And I want to stay with Daddy longer. Your mom's right, Thorn said gently. Growing boys need their sleep. But I'll see you tomorrow, I promise. Maybe we can explore the nature trail the resort has? I saw a map earlier, and it's wheelchair accessible. With the birds and squirrels, and maybe deer? Arlo asked hopefully. Exactly, Thorn confirmed. And if we're really lucky, we might spot some interesting insects too. Cool. Arlo's excitement was briefly overcome by a yawn he couldn't suppress. Okay, I guess I could sleep. But you promise we'll do the trail tomorrow? I promise, Thorn said solemnly. After breakfast? Arlo nodded her agreement. We can meet in the main lodge around 9. And I can sit on your lap in the wheelchair. Arlo asked Thorn, the question so innocent and yet so loaded with meaning that it momentarily silenced all the adults in the room. If that's okay with your mom, Thorn said carefully, looking to Arlo for guidance. It's okay, she confirmed, her throat tight with emotion. As long as you're careful and listen to your father about safety. I will. Arlo threw his arms around Thorn's neck in a spontaneous hug that clearly caught the man by surprise. After a moment of hesitation, Thorn returned the embrace, his eyes closing briefly as he held his son for the first time. Arlo turned away, giving them privacy in this moment while blinking back her own tears. She heard Thorn's murmured, "Good night, buddy. Sweet dreams," and Arlo's sleepy night, Daddy, in response. Then Zara was gently shepherding Arlo toward the door, leaving Arlo and Thorn alone for one final moment. 9 o'clock, Arlo confirmed. We'll meet you in the lodge. I'll be there, Thorn promised. And Arlo? Thank you. For today, for tomorrow. For him. He's thanking you all on his own, Arlo replied with a small smile. Good night, Thorn. Good night. As they walked back to their hotel room, Arlo between them holding both their hands, Zara leaned close to whisper in Arlo's ear. You okay? Getting there, Arlo replied honestly. It's a lot to process. But worth it. Zara nodded toward Arlo, who was half sleepwalking between them, exhausted but happy. Arlo looked at her son's face, the contentment there that hadn't been present before despite all her efforts to give him a complete life. Yes, she said softly. Worth it. Back in their room, Arlo fell asleep almost immediately, clutching his stuffed otter and murmuring something about monkeys as he drifted off. Arlo sat on the edge of his bed for a long time, watching him sleep, thinking about the day's revelations and what they meant for their future. He really has Thorn's eyes, Zara observed, handing Arlo a cup of tea from the room's small refreshment station. I never noticed it before, but seeing them together, it's unmistakable. I know, Arlo agreed, accepting the tea gratefully. Every time he gets that focused look when he's figuring something out, I see Thorn. It used to hurt, that reminder. Now, I don't know. It feels different. Because Thorn is real again, Zara suggested, settling into the armchair by the window. Not just a painful memory or a carefully edited story you tell Arlo, but an actual person who's going to be part of your lives. And that's terrifying, Arlo admitted. Not just because of the complications or the need to rewrite our routines, but because, what if I've made an unforgivable mistake, Zara? What if Thorn can never truly forgive me for keeping Arlo from him all these years? Do you need his forgiveness? The question caught Arlo off guard. Yes, I think I do. Not for my sake, but for Arlo's. If Thorn holds on to that anger, that resentment, it will eventually affect their relationship. And Arlo deserves better than that. Then give it time, Zara advised. You both hurt each other. You both made decisions that had consequences neither of you fully understood at the time. But I saw how Thorn looks at that boy, with pure love, Harlow. That love might be the bridge that helps you both move past the hurt. When did you get so wise? Harlow asked, echoing her question from earlier. Always been wise, Zara repeated with a grin. You just don't listen often enough. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the mountain air crisp with the promise of autumn. Harlow was up at dawn, too excited about the planned nature walk to sleep any longer, despite his late night. He practically vibrated with energy as Harlow helped him dress in practical clothes for hiking. Do you think we'll see bears? He asked, pulling on his sneakers with unusual efficiency. Daddy said there might be bears in these mountains. I think bears generally stay away from resort areas, Harlow assured him, mentally noting to have a word with Thorn about managing expectations. But we'll definitely see birds and smaller animals, like squirrels and chipmunks. Harlow's face lit up. I love chipmunks. They have stripes and poachy cheeks for carrying nuts. Exactly. Harlow smiled, her heart warming at his enthusiasm. Ready for breakfast? If we eat quickly, we'll have time to stop by the gift shop for a disposable camera so you can take pictures of what we see. Yes. Harlow was already heading for the door. Can I get a hat too? A park ranger hat, like real nature scientists wear. We'll see what they have, Harlow promised, grabbing her purse and following him out. Breakfast was a hurried affair, with Harlow too excited to eat more than a few bites of pancake before declaring himself super full and ready for adventure. Harlow managed to convince him to drink his orange juice and eat a banana for energy before they headed to the gift shop, where he selected a khaki hat with the resort logo and a small pair of binoculars that were more toy than functional equipment. By the time they reached the main lodge, it was 5 minutes before 9. Harlow's stomach fluttered with unexpected nerves as they approached the meeting point. What if Thorn had changed his mind overnight? What if the reality of fatherhood had sunk in and he decided it was too much, too sudden? But her fears proved unfounded. Thorn was already waiting in the lobby, his wheelchair positioned near the large windows overlooking the mountains. He was dressed in outdoor clothing, a small backpack hooked over the back of his chair. When he spotted them, his face broke into a genuine smile that erased years from his appearance. Good morning, he called, wheeling toward them. Ready for our adventure, Ranger Harlow? Harlow beamed, adjusting his new hat proudly. I got binoculars too. For bird watching. Excellent thinking, Thorn approved. I brought some field guides so we can identify what we see. He patted the backpack behind him. And a few snacks for when explorers get hungry. You thought of everything, Harlow observed, impressed despite herself. You didn't have to do all that. I wanted to, Thorn said simply. I've got 5 years of fatherhood to catch up on. Might as well start with being prepared. The nature trail began just behind the main lodge, a well-maintained path that wound through the forest surrounding the resort. True to the brochure's description, it was fully accessible, with a smooth, compacted surface wide enough for Thorn's wheelchair and gentle grades instead of steps at elevation changes. Harlow, initially torn between walking on his own and accepting Thorn's offer to ride on his lap, eventually settled for alternating between the two. When on foot, he darted ahead, then back, pointing out interesting leaves, rocks, and occasional wildlife with boundless enthusiasm. When tired, he settled comfortably on Thorn's lap, listening intently as his father identified birds by their calls or explained the difference between deciduous and coniferous trees. Watching them together, Harlow felt a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't quite untangle. Joy at seeing Harlow so happy, regret for the years they had missed, fear of the changes to come, and beneath it all, a curious warmth when Thorn caught her eye and smiled, sharing a moment of parental pride when Harlow correctly identified a pine cone or spotted a woodpecker before either of them. He's a natural, Thorn said during one such moment, his voice low as Harlow examined a particularly fascinating beetle on a nearby log. So observant, so curious. He gets that from you, Harlow acknowledged. That scientific mind, always wanting to understand how things work. And the artistic eye from you, Thorn countered, nodding toward where Harlow was now attempting to sketch the beetle in a small notebook Thorn had brought along. Look at how carefully he's observing the details, trying to capture them. They watched in companionable silence for a moment, the tension between them temporarily eased by their shared focus on their son. I've been thinking about what you said last night, Thorn said finally, his voice careful. About legal recognition and my parental rights. I'd like to proceed with that as soon as possible. I've already called my lawyer this morning. Harlow tensed slightly. Your lawyer? Not for any adversarial purpose. Thorne assured her quickly. Just to understand the process. I want to do this right. Make sure everything is properly documented. For Arlo's sake, and for all our peace of mind. Of course, Harlow nodded, relaxing slightly. I'll cooperate fully. We'll need to update his birth certificate, establish formal custody arrangements. Joint custody? Thorne suggested, watching her face carefully. Equal parenting time, as much as distance allows. The question gave Harlow pause. Joint custody would mean significant time away from Arlo. Weeks when he would be in Seattle with Thorne instead of at home with her. The thought made her chest tighten with anxiety. That would be difficult with the current distance, she said cautiously. Arlo has school, friends, a routine in Portland. I've been thinking about that too, Thorne admitted. My company has been considering opening a branch office in Portland for a while now. I could accelerate those plans, relocate there at least part-time. It would make co-parenting much more feasible. The suggestion caught Harlow by surprise. You'd move to Portland? For Arlo? In a heartbeat, Thorne said without hesitation. He's my son, Harlow. I've already missed 5 years of his life. I don't want to miss any more than necessary. Before she could respond, Arlo called out excitedly. Daddy, Mommy, look. A deer. They turned to see a young doe cautiously approaching the edge of the trail about 50 yards ahead, her ears flicking nervously as she evaluated these strange intruders in her forest. Stay very still, Thorne instructed softly. If we don't move or make loud noises, she might come closer. Arlo froze obediently, his eyes wide with wonder as the deer hesitated, then delicately stepped onto the trail, pausing to nibble at some leaves on a low-hanging branch. She's beautiful, Arlo whispered, clutching his binoculars but not raising them, afraid the movement might scare the animal away. She is, Harlow agreed, unconsciously placing her hand on Thorne's shoulder as they all watched the graceful creature. The doe raised her head, dark eyes regarding them warily for a long moment before she turned and bounded back into the forest, white tail flashing as she disappeared among the trees. That was amazing, Arlo exclaimed once she was gone, his voice returning to its normal enthusiastic volume. A real deer. Up close. Did you see how she looked right at us? Like she was thinking about us thinking about her. Nature's greatest gift, Thorne said, smiling at his son's excitement. Those moments of connection with other living creatures, when we remember we're all part of the same world. Can we come back tomorrow and see if she returns? Arlo asked hopefully. Maybe she has babies nearby? Baby deer are called fawns, and they have spots when they're little for camouflage. Harlow and Thorne exchanged glances, both recognizing the complication in Arlo's innocent request. Tomorrow was Monday. Harlow and Arlo were supposed to drive back to Portland. Thorne would return to Seattle. Their weekend of discovery was coming to an end, and reality was waiting just around the corner. We have to head home tomorrow, remember? Harlow said gently. You have school on Tuesday, and I have that deadline for the butterfly book illustrations. Arlo's face fell. But what about Daddy? Is he coming with us? The question hung in the air between them, simple yet impossibly complex. Not right away, Thorne answered, his voice steady despite the emotion Harlow could see in his eyes. I have to go back to Seattle first, to my home and my work there. But we'll see each other very soon. How soon? Arlo pressed, a hint of anxiety creeping into his voice. Tomorrow? The next day? Not quite that soon, Thorne admitted. But how about next weekend? I could drive down to Portland on Friday evening, spend Saturday and Sunday with you. Would that be okay? Arlo considered this, his small face serious. That's 5 whole days away. That's forever. It might feel that way, Thorne acknowledged. But we can video call every evening until then. I can show you my house in Seattle, introduce you to my cat, Galileo. You have a cat? Arlo's eyes widened with new interest. What color is he? Is he friendly? Does he do tricks? He's a big orange tabby, very friendly, and his only trick is knowing exactly when I'm about to open a can of tuna, Thorne replied with a smile. You'll love him. Can I meet him soon? Can he come to Portland too? We'll figure something out, Thorne promised, catching Harlow's eye over Arlo's head. Your mom and I are going to work together to make sure we can all spend plenty of time together, even though we live in different cities right now. The right now, hung in the air between the adults, an acknowledgement of discussions yet to be had, decisions yet to be made. For now, Harlow said, placing her hand on Arlo's shoulder, let's enjoy the rest of our nature walk. We still have half the trail to explore, and who knows what other animals we might see. This successfully redirected Arlo's attention, and they continued along the path, the conversation shifting back to safer topics, the types of trees surrounding them, the birds calling from the canopy, the small stream they crossed via a wooden bridge. But the question of their future arrangements remained, hovering just beneath the surface of their temporary wilderness idyll. That evening, after a day filled with exploration and discovery, they had dinner together in the resort's family restaurant. Arlo, exhausted but happy, fell asleep at the table before dessert arrived, his head resting against Thorne's arm where he had snuggled up to look at pictures from their walk on Thorne's phone. I should get him to bed, Harlow said, watching her son's peaceful face. It's been an overwhelming day for him. For all of us, Thorne agreed, his expression soft as he looked at the sleeping child. I can't believe how quickly he's accepted me. I expected. I don't know, hesitation? Questions? Doubts? The videos helped, Harlow said. He already knew you in a way. Admired you. The reality just connected to the image he already had in his mind. I'm grateful for that, Thorne admitted. That you shared those pieces of me with him, even when you had every reason to paint me as the villain of the story. I couldn't do that to him, Harlow said simply. Whatever happened between us, I always knew you would have loved him if you'd known about him. It wouldn't have been fair to deprive him of that knowledge, even if I thought I was protecting him from the pain of your absence. Thorne was quiet for a moment, considering her words. I've been angry since yesterday, he said finally. Hurt. Thinking about all I've missed, his birth, his first steps, first words. The thousands of moments that make up a child's early years. Part of me wanted to blame you entirely, to hold on to that anger as justification for legal action, for demands. Harlow tensed, waiting for what would come next. But today, watching you with him, seeing how you've raised him, how much you've sacrificed to give him a good life. I can't hold on to that anger, Harlow. Not if I want to be the father he deserves. What are you saying? Harlow asked cautiously. I'm saying I choose forgiveness, Thorne replied, meeting her gaze directly. Not because what happened wasn't painful, not because the loss wasn't real, but because holding on to that pain won't help us move forward. And Arlo needs us to move forward, together. The words washed over Harlow like a wave, relief and gratitude mingling with her own sense of accountability. I've made mistakes, she acknowledged, her voice thick with emotion. Keeping him from you was wrong, whatever my justifications. I see that now, watching you together. He needed you in his life. You both did. We can't change the past, Thorne said, unconsciously echoing their conversation from the night before. But we can choose how we shape the future. For his sake, and maybe for our own as well. Harlow nodded, a tentative peace settling between them. About your suggestion earlier regarding Portland. The relocation? Thorne asked. I meant it. My company has been considering a Portland office for over a year. This just gives me personal motivation to make it happen sooner rather than later. It would make co-parenting much easier, Harlow acknowledged. But it's a big move for you. Your medical team, your support system, your home, they're all in Seattle. All replaceable, Thorne said with certainty. Nothing is more important than being present for my son. If that means building a new life in Portland, that's what I'll do. The conviction in his voice reminded Harlow of the man she had fallen in love with years ago, passionate, determined, unwavering once his mind was set. It was both comforting and disconcerting to see that core aspect of him unchanged by time and circumstance. We should get him to bed, she said finally, not quite ready to discuss the full implications of Thorne's potential move. It's late, and tomorrow will be another emotional day with goodbyes. Thorne nodded, carefully shifting Arlo into Harlow's arms. The boy stirred briefly, murmuring something about frogs before settling again, his small body warm and trusting against her chest. I'll walk you to your room, Thorne offered, maneuvering his wheelchair alongside her as they left the restaurant. They moved through the quiet resort in companionable silence, the weight of their conversations both spoken and unspoken settling around them like the mountain mist that was beginning to form in the valleys below. At her door, Harlow turned to face him, Arlo still sleeping in her arms. Thank you for today, she she said softly. "For being so good with him, so patient. For being the father I always knew you could be, despite everything." "Thank you for allowing it," Thorn replied, his voice equally quiet. "I know it couldn't have been easy, watching him form an instant attachment to someone who was a stranger yesterday." "Not a stranger," Harlow corrected. "His father. Whatever our past, whatever complications lie ahead, that fact remains. You're his father, and he deserves to know you, to love you, to be loved by you." Thorn reached out tentatively, gently touching Arlo's hair where it curled against Harlow's shoulder. "I do love him," he said, wonder in his voice. "Already, completely. I didn't know it was possible to form such a profound connection so quickly." "That's parenthood," Harlow smiled. "It hits you all at once, this overwhelming love for a person you're just getting to know." "I'm beginning to understand that," Thorn acknowledged, his hand falling back to his lap. "Good night, Harlow. I'll see you both in the morning." "Breakfast at 8, she suggested. "We should leave by 10 to make it back to Portland at a reasonable hour." 8 it is, he agreed. "Sleep well." As she carried Arlo into their room, carefully undressing him and tucking him into bed without waking him fully, Harlow felt a curious lightness in her chest. The weight of her secret, carried for so long, had been lifted. In its place was something new and undefined, not the romantic love she had once shared with Thorn, but perhaps the beginning of a different kind of love, the kind that exists between parents who put their child's needs above their own history. It wouldn't be easy. There would be disagreements, adjustments, challenges as they learned to co-parent across distance, then perhaps in the same city. There would be explanations to family and friends, legal matters to settle, routines to establish. But watching Arlo sleep, his face peaceful with the simple joy of having found his father, Harlow knew with certainty that they would find their way through those challenges together. The next morning brought tearful goodbyes as Arlo struggled to understand why his newfound father couldn't simply come home with them. "But why do you have to go to Seattle?" he asked, his lower lip trembling as they stood in the resort parking lot. "I want you to come to Portland with us. You can live in our guest room. It has a big window and a desk for working." "I wish I could, buddy," Thorn said, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "But I have my job in Seattle and my cat to take care of, and some important meetings this week. But remember what we talked about? I'll be in Portland on Friday evening, and we'll have the whole weekend together. And we'll video call every night until then," Harlow added, kneeling beside her son. "You can show your daddy your room, your toys, your drawings." "It's not the same," Arlo insisted, a tear escaping despite his obvious effort to be brave. "I just found you. I don't want you to go away again." "I'm not going away," Thorn assured him, reaching out to wipe the tear from his son's cheek. "Not ever again. This is just a short separation while I take care of some things in Seattle. But I will always come back to you, Arlo. Always. Promise?" Arlo asked, his voice small. "I promise," Thorn said solemnly. "And I never break my promises." After one final, fierce hug, Arlo allowed himself to be guided to Harlow's car, though he insisted on sitting by the window where he could wave to Thorn until they were out of sight. The drive back to Portland was quieter than usual, Arlo lost in thought as he watched the scenery pass by. Occasionally he would ask a question about his father, where exactly he lived in Seattle, what his job was like, whether his cat Galileo liked to play with toys, but mostly he seemed to be processing the enormous changes of the past 2 days in his own way. That evening, true to his word, Thorn called on video. Arlo's face lit up at the sight of his father on the screen, and he immediately launched into a tour of their apartment, proudly showing off his room, his toy collection, and especially his bookshelf filled with nature books and field guides, just like the ones you had on our hike, Daddy. Watching them interact, Harlow felt a sense of rightness that surprised her. This was how it should have been all along, Arlo knowing his father, Thorn involved in his son's life. The path to this point had been winding and painful, but perhaps they had arrived exactly where they needed to be. Over the next few weeks, a new routine began to establish itself. Thorn drove down to Portland every Friday evening, staying through Sunday afternoon. He found a wheelchair-accessible hotel near Harlow's apartment initially, but by the third weekend, they had all agreed it made more sense for him to stay in Harlow's guest room, which she and Arlo had modified with accessibility features based on Thorn's guidance. The video calls continued nightly, becoming a cherished ritual for Arlo, who would save up stories from school and questions about nature to share with his father. Arlo found herself increasingly included in these conversations, first just to help Arlo manage the technology, but gradually as an active participant in three-way discussions about Arlo's education, his interests, and the day-to-day decisions of parenting. 6 weeks after the wedding revelation, Thorne arrived for his usual weekend visit with news. "The Portland office is happening," he announced over dinner Friday evening. "The board approved the expansion yesterday. We've already found a building downtown, and renovations for accessibility will begin next month. I'll be relocating permanently after the new year." "You're moving here?" Arlo exclaimed, nearly knocking over his milk in excitement. "Forever? No more Seattle?" "Forever," Thorne confirmed, smiling at his son's enthusiasm. "I'll still have to travel occasionally for work, but Portland will be my home base." "Our home base," he added, meeting Arlo's eyes across the table. Later, after Arlo was in bed, they sat in the living room discussing the implications of this development. The custody arrangements they had tentatively established would need to be revised. The legal process of adding Thorne to Arlo's birth certificate was already underway, but now they needed to consider more practical matters: school districts, holiday schedules, the daily logistics of co-parenting in the same city. "I've been looking at apartments near here," Thorne mentioned, scrolling through listings on his tablet. "There's a new building about 10 blocks away with fully accessible units. It would keep Arlo in the same school district, make transitions between our homes easier." "That makes sense," Arlo agreed, leaning over to look at the listings. Their shoulders brushed, a casual contact that nonetheless sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. She moved back slightly, confused by her own reaction. "These look nice. Spacious enough for when Arlo stays with you." "That's what I thought," Thorne said, apparently not noticing her momentary discomfort. "I want him to have his own room, space for his books and toys. A home with me, not just a place he visits." "He'll love that," Arlo said softly. "He talks about you constantly, you know. Daddy said this, and Daddy thinks that." His teacher mentioned that he's been drawing pictures of the three of us at school, you, me, and him together. Thorne looked up from the tablet, surprise evident in his expression. "The three of us? Together?" "Children often imagine their parents reuniting," Arlo explained quickly. "It's a normal fantasy, especially in the early stages of accepting divorce or separation. We should probably talk to him about it. Make sure he understands that our co-parenting arrangement doesn't mean that we're getting back together," Thorne finished for her. "Right? Of course. That would be confusing for him." "Exactly," Arlo agreed, though something in Thorne's tone made her look at him more closely. "We're in a good place now, as co-parents. That's what matters for Arlo." "Agreed," Thorne said, returning his attention to the apartment listings. "Co-parents. Partners in raising our son." The conversation moved on to other topics: Arlo's upcoming school science fair, Thorne's physical therapy schedule, Arlo's new book illustration project. But a subtle shift had occurred, a question neither was quite ready to acknowledge hanging in the air between them. As the weeks passed and the holidays approached, that unspoken question continued to hover at the edges of their interactions. Thorne found an apartment in the building he'd shown Arlo, signing a lease that would begin January 1st. Preparations for his relocation progressed, with Arlo eagerly involved in every step, from choosing paint colors for his new bedroom to helping select furniture from online catalogs. "We need a big bookshelf for all my nature books," he insisted during one such session. "And maybe a desk by the window so I can draw the birds outside, like Mommy does in her studio." "Excellent suggestions," Thorne approved, adding both items to their virtual shopping cart. "What else do you think we need?" Arlo considered seriously. "A spare room," he declared finally, "in case Mommy ever needs to stay over too. Like if there's a big storm or something." Thorne and Arlo exchanged glances, that unspoken question flickering between them again. "That's thoughtful, buddy," Thorne said carefully. "But the apartment only has 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for you. But your mom's place is just a short distance away, so she can always get home safely. Unless there's a really, really big storm," Arlo persisted. "With lightning and thunder and maybe even a tornado." "We don't get many tornadoes in Portland," Arlo reminded him gently. "But it's sweet that you're thinking about everyone's safety." The matter seemed settled, but later that evening, after Arlo was asleep, Thorne brought it up again. He keeps finding ways to put us together, he observed, his voice thoughtful. The spare room comment today. Last week it was suggesting we all go to the zoo as a family outing. Before that, he asked if we could all have dinner together every night once I moved to Portland. It's normal, Harlow repeated her earlier explanation. Children of divorced parents often fantasize about reconciliation. It gives them a sense of security, of wholeness. I know the psychology, Thorne agreed. But I'm wondering if we're sending mixed signals without realizing it. These past few months, we've been spending a lot of time together, all three of us. Weekend outings, dinner most nights when I'm here, our nightly video calls that often include all of us. We're co-parenting, Harlow said, though she'd had similar thoughts herself. It's good for Arlo to see us working together, being friendly. Friendly, Thorne echoed, his expression unreadable. Is that what we are, Harlow? Just friendly co-parents? The question hung in the air between them, direct and unavoidable now. Harlow felt her heart rate increase, her palms suddenly damp with nervous perspiration. What else would we be? She asked cautiously. Thorne held her gaze steadily. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because sometimes, when we're together like this, it feels like more. Like we're building something that goes beyond just parallel parenting of our son. Harlow looked away, unable to maintain eye contact under the intensity of his gaze. We have history, Thorne. Complicated history. And now we have Arlo binding us together. It's natural that there would be echoes of what we once had. Echoes, he repeated thoughtfully. Or perhaps foundations for something new. Something different from what we had before, but valuable in its own right. Are you saying? Harlow trailed off, uncertain how to frame the question. I'm saying that I care about you, Harlow, Thorne said simply. Not just as Arlo's mother, not just as my co-parent, but as the woman you are now. The strong, creative, devoted mother who raised our son so beautifully. The person who has shown such grace in adapting to my sudden presence in your lives. The woman I find myself thinking about even when we're not discussing Arlo. Harlow's breath caught in her throat. Thorne, you don't need to respond now, he said quickly. I'm not asking for anything, not pressuring for any kind of commitment or change in our arrangement. I just wanted to be honest about what I'm feeling, in case you might be feeling something similar. I don't know what I'm feeling, Harlow admitted, the honesty feeling like both a risk and a relief. Everything has changed so quickly. 3 months ago, you weren't in our lives at all. Now you're moving to Portland. We're establishing custody arrangements, building a co-parenting relationship. It's a lot to process. Of course it is, Thorne agreed. And I shouldn't have added to that complexity with my feelings. I apologize. Don't apologize for being honest, Harlow said, meeting his gaze again. I value that. I just need time to sort through my own thoughts, to understand what I want beyond what's best for Arlo. Take all the time you need, Thorne said, his expression softening. I'm not going anywhere. Well, except to Seattle for the holidays, but then right back here in January. The tension broke as they both smiled at his small joke. The conversation moved on to safer topics. Arlo's Christmas wish list, the scheduled hearing for Thorne's paternity recognition, plans for the upcoming school break. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities neither had allowed themselves to consider before. Christmas came and went, with Thorne joining them for the holiday itself before returning to Seattle to finalize his relocation. Arlo was delighted by this arrangement, especially when he discovered that one of his major gifts was a joint present from both parents, a professional-grade telescope with adaptations that made it accessible for Thorne to use from his wheelchair when they stargazed together. This is the best Christmas ever, Arlo declared as they set up the telescope on Harlow's small balcony that evening. Because we're all together, like a real family. The words hung in the air, neither adult quite sure how to respond. It was Thorne who finally spoke, his voice gentle but firm. We are a real family, buddy, he said, adjusting the telescope's height. Families come in all different shapes and arrangements. Some parents live together, some live apart. What makes us a family is that we all love each other and take care of each other, not where we sleep at night. Arlo considered this, his small face serious in the glow of the Christmas lights. So even though you and Mommy don't live in the same house, we're still a family. Absolutely, Harlow confirmed, kneeling beside him. Your daddy and I both love you more than anything in the world. And we care about each other too, as your parents. That's what makes us a family. Okay. Arlo seemed satisfied with this explanation. But I still think it would be nice if we all lived together someday. Like Joey at school, his parents lived apart, but then they had a big party and now they live together again, and Joey says they're conciliated or something. Reconciled, Thorn corrected gently, his eyes meeting Harlow's over their son's head. And every family is different, buddy. What's right for Joey's family might not be right for ours. But it might be. Arlo pressed, his perceptiveness sometimes startling for a 5-year-old. The future holds all kinds of possibilities, Harlow said diplomatically. But for now, let's focus on the amazing present we have, Christmas together, this beautiful telescope, and Jupiter waiting for us to find it in the night sky. The distraction worked, and soon Arlo was engrossed in peering through the telescope at the distant planet, exclaiming over the moons he could just barely make out. But the question he had raised remained with both adults, adding another layer to the complex emotions already brewing between them. When Thorn returned to Seattle the next day, his goodbye with Arlo was easier than previous separations, tempered by the knowledge that his move to Portland was just a week away. His goodbye with Harlow, however, carried a new weight, a sense of possibilities unresolved. "Think about what I said," he murmured as they embraced briefly at the door. "No pressure, just think about it." "I will," she promised, and meant it. The week that followed was filled with practical preparations for Thorn's relocation and the shared custody arrangement that would begin in January. But beneath the logistics and planning, Harlow found herself considering Thorn's words, examining her own feelings with a thoroughness she had avoided until now. Was there something between them beyond their shared love for Arlo? The easy comfort that had developed over the past months, the way they seemed to understand each other's thoughts without explanation, the warmth she felt in his presence, were these merely the natural results of their shared purpose as parents, or signs of something deeper? And if there was something deeper, was it wise to explore it? They had failed once before, hurt each other profoundly. The stakes were so much higher now, with Arlo's happiness and stability to consider. If they tried again and failed again, the damage would extend beyond just the two of them. Yet as New Year's approached, and with it Thorn's permanent move to Portland, Harlow found herself increasingly drawn to the possibility he had raised. Not a return to what they had been. They were different people now, shaped by time and experience, but something new, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose that had been missing in their youthful romance. On January 1st, she and Arlo helped Thorn move into his new apartment, arranging furniture, unpacking boxes, making the space feel like home. Arlo was ecstatic, darting from room to room, arranging his books on the new bookshelf, testing the desk by the window, and introducing his stuffed animals to their second home. "This is where you'll stay when you're with me," Thorn explained as they set up Arlo's room. 3 nights a week, plus alternate weekends, just like we talked about. But you can always call Mommy, and she's just a few blocks away if you need her. "I know," Arlo said confidently. "And you can come visit us at Mommy's house too, right? Like for dinner and to help with my homework. If your mom is okay with that," Thorn said, glancing at Harlow who was hanging curtains at the window. "Of course," she said without hesitation. "Our door is always open to you, Thorn. Your family." The word hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond its simple definition. Family. What they had become, unexpectedly but undeniably. What they might continue to evolve into, if they were brave enough to explore the possibilities. Later, after Arlo had fallen asleep in his new bed, exhausted from the excitement of the day, Harlow and Thorn sat in the living room, sharing a quiet moment and a bottle of champagne to celebrate the new year and new beginnings. "He seems happy here," Harlow observed, looking around the apartment that reflected so much of Thorn's personality yet had clearly been designed with Arlo in mind as well. "Comfortable already?" "I hope so," Thorn said, his expression softening as he glanced toward the hallway leading to his son's room. "I want this to feel like home to him, not just a place he visits." "It will," Harlow assured him. "He already loves being with you. The location hardly matters." "And you?" Thorn asked, his voice quieter now. "How do you feel about all this? The shared custody, me being so close by, the changes to your routine?" Honestly, Harlow considered the question carefully. "It feels right. Seeing you with Arlo, watching how naturally you've taken to fatherhood, how much he thrives in your presence, It confirms what I've known deep down all along. He needs both of us in his life. We make a good team, Thorn agreed, his gaze steady on hers. Better than I expected, given our history. Maybe because of our history, Harlow suggested. We learned from our mistakes. We're more patient now, more willing to communicate, to compromise. Growth through adversity, Thorn nodded. One of nature's most reliable patterns. They fell into comfortable silence, sipping their champagne, each lost in thought. Outside the window, the lights of Portland glittered against the night sky, a new year stretching before them filled with possibilities. I've been thinking about what you said, Harlow said finally, setting down her glass. About us. About there being something more between us than just co-parenting. Thorn tensed slightly, his expression carefully neutral. And I think, maybe there is, she admitted, her voice soft but certain. Something new, something different from what we had before. Something built on who we are now, not who we were then. Something worth exploring? Thorn asked, hope evident in his voice despite his attempt at restraint. Something worth exploring, Harlow agreed. Slowly, carefully, with Arlo's well-being always at the forefront of our minds. But yes, I think what's growing between us deserves a chance to develop naturally, to see where it might lead. The smile that spread across Thorn's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, warm and bright with promise. He reached across the space between them, offering his hand, and after only a moment's hesitation, Harlow placed hers in his, their fingers intertwining in a gesture both familiar and entirely new. To new beginnings, he said softly, raising his glass with his free hand. To new beginnings, she echoed, clinking her glass against his. And to the unexpected journeys that bring us exactly where we need to be, even when we take the longest possible route to get there. As they sat together in the quiet of the new year, hands linked and hearts opening to possibilities neither had imagined just months before, Harlow felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. The secret she had carried for so long, revealed in that single moment at a wedding when her son recognized his father, had not been the ending she had feared, but rather the beginning of something beautiful, a family finding its way back to wholeness, though in a form none of them could have predicted. And in that moment, she knew with certainty that sometimes our greatest mistakes lead to our most precious gifts, if only we have the courage to face the truth and the wisdom to learn from it. Life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes a single moment, a child's innocent words, a chance encounter, can change everything we thought we knew about our past and future. If Harlow and Thorn's journey has touched your heart, subscribe for more stories that remind us it's never too late for truth to heal what once was broken. Because sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings arise from the moments we least expect.